She was framed for a crime she didn't commit, but the only one who never gave up on her couldn't even speak. Elena Brooks was no stranger to danger. Once, she had been a Marine, fiercely trained, focused, and unyielding. Now, years after her service, she had reinvented herself as a private investigator, a role that demanded the same grit and determination she had honed in the military. The only difference, instead of enemy combatants, Elena now hunted down corrupt businessmen, cheating spouses, and high-stakes criminals. She was good at it, too good. Her reputation as a sharp, no-nonsense investigator had earned her the trust of those who sought justice. But justice, Elena knew, wasn't always served the way it should be. Some cases were complicated, murky at best, with the real criminals hiding in the shadows of power and influence. Her office was modest, tucked away on a quiet street in downtown Charleston, but it was filled with the remnants of countless cases she had cracked. Files stacked neatly on her desk, photographs pinned to the wall. Everything had its place, a reflection of Elena's structured mind. But the one constant presence in her life, the one thing that always made her feel grounded in a world of chaos, was Rex. Rex was more than a dog. He was a companion, a protector, and for all intents and purposes, the only family Elena had left. He was a brown and black German shepherd, his coat thick and glossy from years of military service. His bond with Elena went beyond loyalty. It was a connection forged through years of silent understanding. When she spoke, he listened. When she needed him, he was always there. Their partnership was seamless. Elena could read his expressions as clearly as he read hers. Rex had a sharp mind, quick reflexes, and a heart full of loyalty. He was trained for the military, yes, but Elena knew that Rex would follow her into any storm, no matter the cost. And that was exactly what Elena had feared might one day happen. As she sipped her morning coffee, staring out at the city skyline, she tried not to think about how quickly things could change. She was just beginning to dig into a case involving a shady tech CEO, a man whose company was allegedly involved in some under-the-table dealings. Elena had no idea how deep the rabbit hole went until the knock at the door came. It was unexpected, too sudden, too loud to be anything good. Before she could even reach the door, a loud crash followed by the sound of boots pounding on the floor was enough to make her heart race. Panic set in, but she managed to stay calm, sliding her hand into the drawer beside her and grabbing her gun. Her instincts kicked in, but there was no time to think. The door was kicked in, and uniformed officers rushed in, shouting orders. "Elena Brooks, you're under arrest for the murder of Lucas Taylor." Her stomach dropped. She barely had time to process the words before they slammed her hands behind her back and cuffed her. Her body tensed, and her mind raced. What? Elena stammered, struggling against the officer's firm grip. I didn't do anything." The officers didn't answer. They just read her rights. And before she could make a sound, she was yanked out of her apartment and into the cold grip of the police van. She could feel the weight of the accusation pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. Murder? The word echoed in her mind. Lucas Taylor, the CEO of a booming tech company, was dead. The police had a mountain of evidence that pointed directly to Elena. Fingerprints on the murder weapon, a surveillance video showing her walking out of the building the night Taylor was killed. A motive, a strong one too. She had been investigating some shady dealings within Taylor's company, a series of investments that didn't quite add up. Elena had been digging too deep, and now it seemed she was the prime suspect. Her mind raced with questions. How had this happened? Who had set her up? And why? But the questions would have to wait. For now, all Elena could do was hold on to one bitter thought. Everything she had worked for, the cases she had cracked, the years of hard-earned respect, meant nothing now. She was accused of murder, and nothing could change that. Except, maybe, Rex. Somewhere in the depths of the police station, Elena's heart ached for her loyal companion. Rex hadn't been there when the officers arrived. He had been in the back of her apartment, asleep on the couch, unaware of the storm that was about to descend upon them both. But Elena couldn't help but think that Rex would have sensed something was wrong. He always did. But it was too late now. The officers had taken her, and Rex was nowhere to be found. As Elena was led down the cold, sterile hallways of the station, she knew she had to hold on to one thing: her innocence. She had to believe that somehow she could prove it. But she couldn't do it alone. And right now, the only person she trusted completely, her dog, her partner, was in the hands of someone else. Elena sat in the cold, dimly lit holding cell, her hands shackled to the metal chair. The fluorescent lights above flickered, casting a harsh glow over her surroundings. The walls seemed to close in, and her mind raced, desperately trying to piece together how everything had gone wrong so quickly. She had barely grasped the reality of the situation. She was being accused of murder. The murder of Lucas Taylor, the CEO of Taylor Tech, one of the most influential tech companies in the world. A company she had only recently begun investigating after receiving a tip about possible financial fraud and shady dealings. Taylor was dead, and all the evidence pointed directly at her. It was absurd, but the proof seemed undeniable. Her fingerprints had been found on the murder weapon, a sleek, silver-handled knife, lying in the CEO's office, a place she had never intended to be. Surveillance footage showed her leaving the building on the night of the murder, the camera's timestamp matching the time of death down to the minute. And if that wasn't enough, they had a plausible motive: her investigation into the company's illegal activities. It seemed as though the walls were closing in, and no matter how much Elena wanted to scream her innocence, she could only sit in silence, hands cuffed, feeling more isolated than ever before. As much as she wanted to fight back, the evidence was damning. She had no alibi for that night. No one had seen her enter the building, and the footage from the surveillance cameras was all they had. The only thing that could have saved her was her own word. But how could she convince anyone she hadn't committed the crime when everything was pointing in her direction? Her mind kept going back to the moments before her arrest, the knock at the door, the officers bursting in, the confusion and the panic. She hadn't even been given a chance to explain herself. Now she was trapped in this tiny cell, with only her thoughts and the ticking of the clock to keep her company. The worst part of it all was that she didn't know who could have done this to her. Who would frame her for something so heinous? She had no enemies, at least none that she knew of. No one in her life who would want to destroy everything she had worked for. But clearly someone wanted her to take the fall. Someone who was willing to go to great lengths to make sure she was pinned for a murder she didn't commit. As the hours dragged on, the pain of isolation gnawed at her, but the sound of footsteps down the hallway outside her cell brought her a flicker of hope. The door opened, and a detective stepped in, holding a folder in his hand. Elena recognized him immediately. Detective Ryan Holt. He was tall, with dark hair and a stern expression. She'd met him briefly when she was working with the police on a case a few months ago. He was no nonsense, straight to the point, exactly the kind of person she needed right now. "You've got a lot of explaining to do, Miss Brooks," Holt said, his voice flat. He dropped the folder onto the metal table in front of her, his eyes narrowing as he observed her closely. "The evidence against you is overwhelming. It's not looking good." Elena lifted her chin, her defiance evident. "I didn't do it," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I don't know who's behind this, but I didn't kill Lucas Taylor." Holt raised an eyebrow, clearly unconvinced. "Your fingerprints were found on the weapon. You were seen leaving the scene. And you had a clear motive. What else am I supposed to think?" "I wasn't at the scene," Elena said, her voice becoming more insistent. "I don't know how my fingerprints got on that knife. I'm telling you, I was set up. Someone planted that evidence. Someone who wanted to frame me." "Who?" Holt asked, leaning forward. "Who would want to frame a private investigator like you?" "I don't know, but I've been investigating Taylor Tech. I was looking into some financial discrepancies, and I found a trail of money that led to illegal activity. Maybe that's, yeah, why they did this. Holt's eyes flickered with something akin to skepticism, but he didn't speak immediately. Instead, he flipped through the folder, taking his time to look at the documents. You're telling me you were investigating the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company? All right. And you didn't think it might get dangerous? I didn't know it was going to lead to this, Elena replied, her voice softening, but her determination never wavered. I didn't know someone would want to kill him or set me up for his murder. Holt sighed, rubbing his temple as if considering her words. After a long pause, he spoke again, his tone softer this time. Look, Elena, I don't want to believe you did this, but everything points to you. You're the one who had access to the building. You're the one who had the motive. You're the one who's on the footage. I swear, I didn't kill him, Elena said, her voice desperate now. You've got to believe me. I'm being framed. Holt seemed to hesitate for a moment, his gaze shifting between Elena and the folder in front of him. Finally, he closed the folder with a soft snap, his face hardening once again. If you didn't do it, then you need to tell me who did. Elena opened her mouth to respond, but the words were cut off by a loud clanging noise from the hallway. Her heart skipped a beat. She knew that sound. The sound of Rex. The thought of her dog brought a brief moment of relief, and Elena felt a small glimmer of hope. If Rex was here, maybe there was still a chance. Maybe someone was starting to believe her. But that hope was quickly dashed when she heard the sound of footsteps retreating and the door to her cell slammed shut behind Holt. Elena was alone again. The sound of the metal door clanging shut reverberated in Elena's chest, a cruel reminder of her confinement. She couldn't remember how long she had been sitting in that stark, cold cell, but it felt like hours had passed without a single word of reassurance. Time seemed to slow down when you were waiting for a fate that felt like it was beyond your control. Elena had always prided herself on staying calm under pressure, on thinking through every scenario before making a move. But now, in the face of this devastating accusation, she felt more lost than ever. It wasn't just the shock of being arrested, of being accused of murder. It was the knowledge that everything she had worked for, all her efforts to live an honest life after leaving the Marines, were now being called into question. But there was something more, something that hurt deeper than anything else. It was the thought of Rex, her loyal companion, now alone and helpless. He hadn't been there when the officers arrived. He was probably still at her apartment, confused and frightened, wondering where she had gone. And the more she thought about it, the more the gnawing feeling of guilt took root in her heart. She had always known Rex would be her protector, her partner, the one who kept her grounded even in the darkest of times. But now, he was alone, trapped in the uncertainty of her situation. And worse, Elena had no idea what would happen to him next. She could only hope that someone would take care of him until she could find a way out of this mess. Her thoughts were interrupted when the door to her cell opened again. A guard stood there, his eyes dull and indifferent. "You have a visitor," he said gruffly. Elena felt a flicker of hope stir within her, but it was quickly extinguished when the guard stepped aside to reveal a woman in a crisp uniform holding a leash. Elena's heart sank as she saw the brown and black German shepherd standing at her side. "Rex," she whispered, her voice catching in her throat. The dog stood at attention, his sharp, intelligent eyes meeting hers as if to reassure her that he was okay. But the look in his eyes, anxiety and confusion, told her everything she needed to know. He didn't understand what had happened, but he knew something was wrong. The officer holding the leash nudged Rex forward, and Elena rose from her seat, straining against the handcuffs that bound her wrists. She desperately wanted to reach out and touch him, to let him know she hadn't abandoned him, but she couldn't. Not like this. Rex's tail wagged slightly as he neared, but the joy was subdued, a reflection of the strange, tense energy that filled the room. He sniffed at Elena's feet, then sat down, his gaze never leaving her face. The officer seemed to sense the bond between them, and for a moment she softened, stepping back to give them some space. "I'm Officer Noah Bennett," the man said gruffly, his gaze flickering from Elena to Rex. "I've been assigned to look after your dog for now. He's been acting strangely since he arrived." Elena's heart tightened. "What do you mean? Is he okay?" Noah gave a non-committal shrug. "He's refusing to eat. He howls at night. He's been scratching at his kennel door like he's trying to escape." It's odd. Elena's gut clenched. Rex had always been resilient, able to adapt to any situation. But this was different. He wasn't just upset, he was distressed, disoriented, and it made sense. The chaos of the arrest, the confusion of being separated from her, had likely sent him into a state of panic. But the fact that he was behaving so strangely, it made her worry something more was going on. "Do you think he's sick?" Elena asked, her voice tinged with concern. Noah shook his head. "No, not sick. Just, agitated. He's a smart dog, though. He might be trying to tell me something. I'm not sure what, but..." A sudden thought struck Elena like a lightning bolt. "Wait," she said urgently, her voice low. "Rex isn't just acting this way because he's upset. He's trying to tell you something. He's always been more than just a dog. He's been trained to sense things. If he's acting this way, it means something's wrong, something important." Noah raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued but unconvinced. "You think he's trying to communicate something to me?" "I know he is," Elena said firmly, her gaze locked on Rex. She could see the way he was shifting his weight, his ears pricking up whenever she spoke. She had seen him do this before, when he was onto something, when he was trying to alert her to danger or an anomaly. But now, in the sterile confines of this prison-like room, it seemed as though Rex was sensing more than just her distress. "Follow his lead," Elena continued. "If he's acting like this, it's because he's found something. He's trying to show you something. Please, listen to him." Noah's expression softened. He had no reason to believe Elena, not with the weight of the case hanging over her head. But there was something about the way she spoke, the urgency in her voice, that made him pause. He had seen enough in his line of work to know that not everything was as it seemed. He had no idea what kind of trouble Elena was in, but he did know one thing. She had a bond with this dog that ran deeper than he could understand. "All right," Noah said, his voice gruff but thoughtful. "I'll keep an eye on him. But if there's something more going on here, I'm going to need your help. We're not getting anywhere, just sitting around." Elena nodded, the hope returning to her chest, even if only a little. "I'll help you, I promise. I just need to get out of here." As the officer led Rex out of the room, Elena's heart ached with the weight of the separation. Rex, her protector, was no longer by her side, but she had to trust that Noah would listen to the signs that her dog was giving him. There was still so much to uncover, and somehow, Rex was the key to everything. The days passed slowly for Elena, each one heavier than the last. She'd been locked away in the cold, gray cell, her only comfort the fleeting moments when she was allowed to see Rex. Even though their reunions were brief and heavily monitored, Elena could see that something was changing. Rex's strange behavior wasn't just a result of being separated from her. It was something deeper, something that only he seemed to understand. Officer Noah Bennett had been taking care of Rex since the arrest, and Elena had made a point of mentioning how important it was to trust the dog's instincts. She could see in Noah's eyes that he wasn't fully convinced, but there was a spark of doubt there. A glimmer of belief that maybe, just maybe, Elena's claims about her dog's uncanny ability weren't just wild accusations. One evening, as the moon cast its pale light across the cell block, Elena was jolted awake by a sudden sound outside her door. The footsteps that echoed down the hallway were familiar. They were different from the usual heavy strides of the guards. These were lighter, more cautious, and they came closer to her cell with purpose. A moment later, the door to her cell creaked open, and Elena squinted in the low light to see Officer Noah standing there. His face was more serious than usual, and his expression was tight with tension. "I need to talk to you," Noah said in a low voice, glancing around to make sure they weren't being overheard. "It's about Rex." Elena's heart skipped a beat. She pushed herself up from the cot, her pulse quickening. "What happened? Is he okay?" Noah gave a quick nod, but there was something unsettling in the way he stood. "He's fine for now, but something's going on. Something strange." Elena's stomach twisted with a mix of relief and dread. "What do you mean?" "I've been keeping an eye on him, like you asked. And at first I thought it was just him acting out. He's been agitated since you got locked up, but last night..." Noah's voice trailed off, his gaze flickering toward the door as if he feared someone would overhear. "Last night..." "What?" Elena pressed, her breath catching. "Rex woke me up at around 2:30 a.m. Noah continued, his voice dropping even lower. "He was standing by the window, staring out into the yard, and then he started to growl. Not like he does when someone's just passing by. This was different. He was growling at something specific, something outside." Elena leaned forward, her mind racing. She could feel the same surge of instinct that had always guided her in her work. The feeling that something important was slipping through their fingers just out of reach. "What did you do?" she asked. "At first, I thought maybe he had just seen something outside. Someone in the yard, maybe a stray animal. But then I noticed something odd. Rex was fixated on a spot in the far corner of the yard, near the old shed. He wasn't just growling, he was focused, like he knew something was there. And he started scratching at the door, trying to get out." Noah's words hit Elena like a punch to the gut. She knew Rex well enough to understand that he never reacted like this without reason. There was something in that shed, something Rex had noticed that Noah hadn't. "I tried to ignore it at first," Noah said, rubbing his temples, "but it was like he couldn't stop. He just kept scratching at the door like he wanted to escape. So I let him outside." "Did you find anything?" Elena asked, her voice tight with urgency. Noah hesitated, then nodded slowly. "When we got outside, Rex led me straight to the shed. He kept nudging me toward it, his body tense, his nose to the ground. I didn't think much of it at first. Just a weird coincidence, maybe. But when I opened the shed door..." His voice trailed off again, and Elena's pulse quickened. "What did you find?" "There was something buried under the dirt," Noah said, his tone heavy with disbelief. "A small metal box, wrapped in plastic. It didn't look like anything important, but the moment I touched it, Rex went wild. He started barking and scratching at the ground. He wouldn't stop until I pulled the box out." Elena's heart raced as she processed his words. Rex had led Noah straight to something hidden, something important. And if it had been buried like that, it was no coincidence. Someone had gone to great lengths to keep it hidden. What was in the box?" Elena asked, her voice low. Noah's eyes flickered to the floor, and for the first time Elena noticed a shift in his demeanor. He was unnerved, unsure of what he had uncovered. "It was a piece of tech," he said slowly. "A small, high-tech device. It looked like it could have been part of something much bigger, and it was wrapped in plastic, like someone wanted to keep it safe, protected. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it might be connected to the case." Elena's mind raced. Could this be the key to her innocence? The thought hit her like a sudden flash of insight, but she held back the urge to speak too soon. She needed to see the device for herself, to understand why Rex had led them to it. "I need to see it," Elena said firmly. "Where is it now?" "I've got it back at my apartment," Noah replied, his eyes scanning her face. "I wasn't sure what to do with it yet. But if it's connected to the case, then we need to figure out who's behind all this." Elena nodded, her mind racing with possibilities. If Rex led you to that device, it means someone didn't just frame me. They're trying to cover their tracks, and they don't want anyone to find it. Noah's brow furrowed. What do you think it is? I don't know yet, Elena said, her voice determined. But I do know one thing. Whoever is behind all this, they're not just framing me. They're framing me for a reason. And that device, it might be the key to unraveling everything. Noah looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he gave a single nod. All right, we'll take a closer look. But if we're going to figure this out, we need to be careful. Whoever's behind this isn't going to stop. Elena nodded, her mind already racing through the possibilities. Rex had found something, and now it was time to follow the trail. The weight of the device in Noah's hands felt far heavier than its small size suggested. Elena watched him closely as he held it up, studying the metal casing, his fingers tracing its smooth surface as if trying to decipher a puzzle. She had never seen anything like it before. It wasn't the kind of tech she usually encountered in her line of work. Sleek, futuristic, and oddly familiar. There was a sense of urgency building inside her, something that gnawed at her gut. She had to know what this was, and more importantly, why it was linked to her. The shed had been the key, or at least part of it. But this device, buried so carefully beneath the earth, was a much larger piece of the puzzle. Elena was no tech expert, but she could feel in her bones that it had something to do with Lucas Taylor's murder. And that meant it had everything to do with her, with the conspiracy that had framed her. What do you think it is? Elena asked, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. Noah was still turning the device over in his hands, his brow furrowed. I don't know, but I'm starting to think it's not just a random piece of equipment. It looks like part of something much bigger, something high-tech. A device like this could be used for, well, a lot of things. Elena watched as he gently pried open the small compartment on the device, revealing a hidden chip inside. She leaned in, trying to get a better look, but Noah held it closer to his chest. This might be more than we're prepared to handle, he muttered. Elena felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise. What do you mean by that? Noah hesitated, glancing up at her, then back at the device. I've seen tech like this before in a different context. Military projects, secretive biotech labs. There's a particular lab in the area that specializes in synthetic biology. It's not the kind of place you'd want to poke around in. A company with ties to Taylor Tech. And Lucas Taylor was more than just a CEO. He had ties to some very dangerous people. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. The pieces were beginning to fit together, but they didn't make any sense. How could a tech CEO, a man who had built his empire on innovation, be tied to something so dark? To what end had the synthetic biotech been created? Noah, she said, her voice low. What if this device is connected to the murders in the frame job? What if someone is using it to take people's identities? Or worse, create false ones? Noah's eyes widened, as if he were just starting to connect the dots himself. You think that's what this is? A synthetic face? Elena nodded, slowly, her mind spinning. It makes sense. If you can create a synthetic face, a perfect replica of someone, you can frame them for anything. You can ruin their life in a matter of hours. And Taylor Tech, with its connections and resources, would be the perfect front for a project like that. The idea took root quickly, growing in her mind. It wasn't just a frame job. It was something far more insidious. Whoever was behind all this had access to resources, technology, and information that most people could only dream of. And they had used it to target Elena, perhaps because of her investigation into Taylor Tech's dealings. Noah was already typing on his phone, his brow furrowed as he sent a message to someone. Elena could see the urgency in his movements, the growing realization that this was bigger than they had first imagined. You're right, Noah said after a moment, glancing up at her. This isn't just a frame job. It's a setup, a well-planned, coordinated effort to destroy you, ruin your reputation, your career, and whoever's behind it, they'll do whatever it takes to make sure the truth stays buried. Elena clenched her fists, the anger bubbling up inside her like a fire. She had been caught in the middle of something far darker than she had ever imagined, but she wasn't going to go down without a fight. If they thought they could use her as a pawn in their game, they were gravely mistaken. Noah closed his phone, meeting her gaze. I'm going to take this to a tech expert I know, someone who can identify it for sure. If it's what we think it is, it could change everything. Elena nodded, her determination hardening. We can't waste any time. I need to get out of here, Noah. We need to find the truth, and we need to do it fast. If this mask is part of something bigger, then Lucas Taylor isn't the only one who was targeted. And I have a feeling that whoever's behind this is going to stop at nothing to make sure I'm the one who takes the fall. Noah gave her a sharp nod. I'm with you, but we need to be careful. Whoever's involved in this isn't just going to let us waltz in and take their secrets. This goes deeper than we thought. Elena stood up, her eyes locked on the device. I'm not afraid of them. I've fought harder battles than this before. They won't win, not while I still have breath in me. Noah hesitated, then handed her the device. You're going to need this, he said softly. It's our only lead. Elena took the device in her hands, the weight of it grounding her. It wasn't just a piece of tech. It was her ticket to proving her innocence, to uncovering the conspiracy that had framed her. And it was time to move forward. The path ahead was darker than Elena had imagined. The device Noah had discovered wasn't just a piece of advanced technology. It was a part of something much larger, something that seemed designed to erase identities and to replace them, and ultimately to destroy lives. Elena could feel the pieces of the puzzle coming together, but each new revelation brought with it more questions. The technology behind the synthetic face mask wasn't the work of a lone inventor. It had the hallmarks of a well-organized, highly funded operation. Elena sat across from Noah at a small cafe in the outskirts of Charleston, her fingers tracing the edge of her coffee cup absent-mindedly as she waited for him to speak. He had just returned from meeting the tech expert he trusted, a man by the name of Ethan Moore. His eyes were serious as he slid a folder across the table. Inside, there were photos of the device, along with a detailed analysis from Ethan. Ethan confirmed it, Noah said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. This device is part of a larger biotech project, a synthetic facial reconstruction system. It's advanced, highly classified. It's capable of creating lifelike replicas of people, down to their fingerprints, their DNA signatures. If someone wanted to frame you for a crime, this is exactly the kind of technology they'd use. Elena's stomach twisted with a cold sense of dread. The idea that her very identity could be replicated so perfectly, so convincingly, sent a shiver down her spine. But what disturbed her even more was the fact that Lucas Taylor, the CEO of Taylor Tech, had been involved in it. If his company was connected to this kind of technology, then it wasn't just a tech startup, it was a front for something much more dangerous. And there's more, Noah continued, his voice dropping even lower. Ethan's sources say this project was overseen by a corporate fixer named Avery Langston. He's been involved in some shady operations before. But this is a whole new level. Elena's mind raced. She had heard the name Avery Langston before. The corporate world was full of people like him. Smooth-talking, powerful, and willing to do whatever it took to protect the interests of the companies they represented. But to be connected to something this sinister, it was almost unthinkable. Langston's been linked to some high-profile cover-ups, Noah went on, his gaze narrowing. Everything from financial fraud to bribery. But this is different. It's not just about money. This is about erasing people, eliminating them from existence, using technology to fabricate identities and manipulate people. Elena's fists clenched in frustration. So, it's not just about me then. It's about a whole network of people who've been targeted, people who might not know too much, people who've gotten in the way. Noah nodded grimly. Exactly. Langston's not working alone. He's got a partner, Derek Miles. He's a former military scientist, highly skilled in bioengineering and surveillance. If Langston's the brains behind the operation, Miles is the one who makes it all happen. Elena felt a chill creep up her spine as she processed this new information. She had been digging into Taylor Tech's financials, yes, but she had never imagined she'd be uncovering a conspiracy of this scale. The more she thought about it, the clearer it became. Someone had gone to great lengths to make sure the truth was buried, to cover up whatever illegal activities Taylor Tech was involved in. Noah leaned in closer, lowering his voice. These guys aren't just corporate criminals. They've got a whole network of operatives working for them, tech specialists, hackers, even mercenaries. If we're going to expose them, we need to be careful. They've got resources we don't even understand yet. Elena's mind was racing, her thoughts whirling. She had always been a fighter, but this was something she hadn't prepared for. Avery Langston and Derek Miles weren't just trying to protect their company. They were willing to go to any lengths to keep their secrets safe. And she was in their way. We need to find out more about Langston and Miles, Elena said, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. If they're the ones pulling the strings, then they're the ones we need to expose. But we can't just walk in and confront them. We need to know their weaknesses, their connection. We need to get to the heart of this. Noah nodded, his jaw tight. I'm with you, but we can't do this alone. We're already in over our heads. We need help. Elena looked at him, her gaze unwavering. I don't trust anyone else, but if we're going to do this, we have to do it smart. We have to stay one step ahead of them. The silence between them was heavy, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a shared understanding, a bond forged in the fire of danger and uncertainty. Elena knew that with Noah by her side, they had a chance to uncover the truth, but there was no doubt in her mind that they were up against a powerful, ruthless enemy. An enemy who would stop at nothing to silence them both. Noah stood up, his face hardening with resolve. I'll start digging into Langston and Miles. I've got some contacts who might be able to help. But we'll have to move quickly. If they find out we're onto them, they'll come after us. Elena nodded, her gaze fixed on the window across the street. She could feel the weight of the investigation pressing down on her. But she also felt a spark of determination deep inside. She wasn't going to let them win. And not when the truth was within reach. Whatever it took, she would see this through. Noah, Elena said, her voice steady. I want to make sure that whatever happens, we expose them, no matter what. Noah looked at her, his expression firm. We will. I promise you that. As Noah walked out of the cafe, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to escalate. They were entering the lion's den, and there was no turning back now. But Elena was ready. She had always been ready for a fight. And this fight wasn't just for her freedom, it was for the truth. The morning air was thick with tension. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Noah's car, her mind replaying the conversation they had just had at the cafe. The conspiracy was much larger than she had anticipated. Avery Langston and Derek Miles were not just criminals. They were masterminds. They controlled an operation that spanned industries, possibly even governments. And as much as Elena wanted to believe they could expose them, she knew the road ahead was fraught with peril. Noah's eyes were sharp as he drove, glancing at her occasionally as if checking for any sign of hesitation. But Elena's resolve was solid. She had already lost everything, her reputation, her freedom, and now she was fighting for her life. The truth about Lucas Taylor's murder and the conspiracy that had framed her was out there. All they had to do was find it. And if that meant risking their lives, then so be it. Noah's phone buzzed in his pocket, and he answered it with one hand on the wheel. "Bennett," he said gruffly, his eyes narrowing as he listened. Elena could hear snippets of the conversation, something about a lead, a shadowy figure who had just surfaced from the depths of the operation. "Where?" Noah asked, then paused, clearly listening intently. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "Keep eyes on him. Don't let him out of sight. I'll be there in 10. He hung up, his expression more focused than before. "We've got a lead. A guy named Carter Briggs. He's been connected to Langston and Miles. He might know where the lab is, but we need to get to him first." Elena felt a wave of urgency wash over her. "Let's go," she said firmly. The sooner they got to Briggs, the sooner they could find answers. Noah didn't hesitate. He floored the accelerator, the car skimming over the roads like a predator in pursuit. As they neared the location, an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of the city, Elena's nerves tightened. This was where it would all come together. And this was where they would finally uncover the heart of the conspiracy. The complex was eerily quiet as they pulled into a small, hidden parking lot at the far end of the property. Noah parked quickly, his eyes scanning the area. They had to be careful. No one could know they were here. "Noah," Elena whispered urgently, "what if this is a trap? What if Briggs knows we're coming?" He didn't look at her, but she could see the tension in his jaw. "It's a risk we have to take. And if he's connected to Langston and Miles, he's the key to everything, but we have to be smart about it." They crept through the shadows, making their way toward the crumbling building where Briggs had been spotted. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, each step feeling heavier than the last. She wasn't just walking toward Briggs, she was walking into the lion's den, into the heart of the very operation that had framed her for murder. They reached the entrance of the building and carefully pushed open the door. The air inside was thick with dust, the walls covered in grime. A faint sound echoed through the halls. Footsteps. Someone was here. "Stay close," Noah whispered, his hand on the grip of his gun. He moved forward with the caution of someone who had seen too many close calls in his career. Elena followed, keeping her breath steady, her senses on high alert. The hallway stretched out before them, long and narrow, with doors leading off to various rooms. The faint sound of footsteps grew louder, closer. They turned a corner, and there he was, Carter Briggs. Briggs was tall, with a broad build, his face obscured by a hood and dark sunglasses. He looked like a man who had been living on the run for years, someone who had spent his life in the shadows, dodging people like Noah. The moment he saw them, his hand shot to his side, reaching for a weapon, but Noah was faster, drawing his gun in a smooth motion and pointing it at Briggs. "Don't move," Noah commanded, his voice low and authoritative. Briggs froze, his eyes narrowing behind the sunglasses. "I didn't expect company," he said, his voice gravelly. "Guess you've been sniffing around the wrong places, huh?" Elena stepped forward, her voice calm but forceful. "We need information. We know about Langston. We know about Miles. And we know they're coming for us. If you want to stay alive, you'll talk." Briggs laughed, the sound hollow in the empty hall. "You think you're the only ones who know about Langston and Miles. You're way out of your league, sweetheart. Out of your—" "No, we're not," Elena shot back, her gaze steely. "You're going to tell us everything you know, or I swear to God, I'll make sure they know exactly where you're hiding." For a long moment, Briggs seemed to weigh his options. He glanced around the room, his gaze shifting from Elena to Noah and back. Finally, he dropped his hand slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "What makes you think I'm going to help you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Noah tightened his grip on his gun. "Because if you don't, we'll make sure Langston and Miles know where you are. You don't want to be caught in the crossfire. Not with them." Briggs looked between them, his expression unreadable. Then with a resigned sigh, he lowered his head. "All right, I'll talk, but not here." "Too many eyes?" Noah didn't hesitate. "Where?" "Follow me," Briggs said, his voice now betraying a hint of fear. I know a place. But you'd better move fast. Langston's people won't be far behind. As Briggs led them through the winding corridors, Elena's thoughts raced. They were so close to the answers they needed, so close to uncovering the truth that had been buried for too long. But the danger was escalating. She could feel it in the air, the weight of it, pressing down on her shoulders. They reached a stairwell and descended into the basement, where Briggs led them into a small, dimly lit room. The air was thick with the smell of mildew, but Elena didn't care. All that mattered now was getting the information they needed. Briggs moved to a table against the far wall, pulling out a folder filled with documents. He glanced up at them. This is it. This is everything you need to take them down. Before Elena could take a step forward, a loud crash echoed through the building. The sound of boots pounding against the floor. The unmistakable sound of someone or something coming their way. They're here, Briggs muttered, his voice laced with panic. You need to get out. Now? Noah's eyes narrowed. Stay here. We'll take care of it. But Elena knew it was too late. The enemy was already closing in. The crash echoed through the crumbling building like a gunshot, shaking the walls around them. Elena's heart pounded in her chest as she stood frozen in the dimly lit basement room. For a moment, everything seemed to blur. The sound of running footsteps, the scrape of boots against concrete, and the heavy air that felt like it was pressing down on her. Her eyes locked on Noah, who was already scanning the narrow stairwell they had just descended. We're out of time, Noah hissed, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon, his muscles tense and ready to spring into action. Get the documents. We need to move. Now. Briggs, who had been standing near the table with the folder of evidence, looked up in alarm. He was already backing away from the entrance. You don't understand. You need to get out of here. His voice was rising with panic. They'll kill you. They won't let you get away. Not after what you've seen. No one's going to kill anyone if we stick to the plan, Elena said through gritted teeth. She quickly grabbed the folder from the table, glancing at the scattered documents inside. The truth was within her reach, the very thing that could exonerate her. But it was also the thing that had put her in danger. Another crash sounded from upstairs. The footsteps were closer now, too close for comfort. Get down, Noah snapped, his hand pulling Elena toward the far corner of the room. He lowered his voice, speaking quickly and quietly, his eyes darting around as if calculating their next move. We need a way out. Now. Elena's mind raced as she scanned their surroundings. The building was a maze of old storage rooms and narrow hallways, but she knew that somewhere in the labyrinth of concrete walls, there had to be an escape route, a way to avoid the mercenaries who were closing in on them. They couldn't afford to get trapped here. Not now. Briggs was already halfway to the door, but Elena stopped him with a sharp gesture. You know this building better than we do? Where's the nearest exit? Roof access, Briggs said breathlessly. Through the maintenance area in the back. But it's a risk. They've probably already locked it down. If we go that way, it's a straight shot to the roof. We might be able to outrun them. Noah made a split-second decision, his jaw tightening. That's our best bet. Let's move. Without another word, they moved quickly through the basement, their footsteps muffled against the dust-covered floor. Elena felt the weight of the folder in her hand, the evidence of Langston and Miles's operation, the key to her freedom. She couldn't let it go, not after everything she had endured. But as they moved toward the maintenance door, the faint sound of a radio crackled through the air, the voice of one of Langston's men ordering a sweep of the building. Oh, get ready, Noah muttered under his breath. They're on their way. They reached the maintenance door, and Briggs pushed it open carefully, glancing out to make sure the coast was clear. The stairwell leading up to the roof was narrow and cramped, but it was their only option now. Elena followed Noah closely, her thoughts racing. She had always been a strategist, trained to think through every situation. But now, she was relying on instinct. The danger was real, and it was closing in with every passing second. Halfway up the stairs, Elena heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind them. Heavy, quick. Someone was coming. We're running out of time, Noah said, his voice low and urgent. We need to hurry. Elena pushed forward, her heart pounding. The roof was just ahead, but every step she took felt like it might be her last. The stakes had never been higher. They were not just running from the people who had framed her for murder. They were running from people who had killed before, and would do it again. Finally, they reached the top of the stairs. The door to the roof was slightly ajar, and they shoved it open with a forceful push. The air hit them like a wall, the cool breeze ruffling their clothes as they emerged into the open. The roof stretched out before them, offering a glimpse of freedom, but also exposing them to the dangerous open space where they would be easy targets. Elena's eyes scanned the area, searching for a place to hide. The roof had several air conditioning units and pipes that could provide some cover, but they had no time to strategize. The sound of footsteps and shouts grew louder, echoing through the building. "Noah, they're right behind us!" Elena shouted as she heard the doors at the top of the stairs burst open. She could see the flash of movement from the door. Men in tactical gear, their guns raised, eyes scanning the rooftop for their targets. "Get to the edge!" Noah yelled, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward the far side of the building. "We need to climb down to the alley." Elena's pulse raced as she followed him. The ledge of the roof was just a few feet away, and it led down to a narrow alleyway below. It wasn't the best escape, but it was their only shot. They would have to climb down fast before the mercenaries spotted them. Briggs was already ahead, his tall form agile as he scrambled up the metal pipes, moving with the desperation of someone who knew how much was at stake. "Move," Noah snapped, helping Elena up onto the ledge. She scrambled over the side, her fingers gripping the metal bars as she descended quickly, her heart pounding in her chest. The sounds of the mercenaries' voices grew louder, but Elena pushed herself faster. She had to get away. She had to survive. The truth was almost within her reach, and she couldn't afford to let fear stop her now. Noah was right behind her, his grip strong as he helped guide her down. As they neared the ground, Elena could see the alley below, the narrow path that would take them to safety if they could just make it in time. With one final push, they landed on the pavement, breathless and bruised, but they had made it. They had escaped. "We've got the documents," Elena said, her voice trembling but resolute. "We can expose them now." Noah looked at her, his expression a mix of relief and determination. "We're not out of the woods yet, but we've got what we need. Now we fight back." Elena nodded, clutching the folder tightly in her hand. She was still alive, and that meant that there was still a chance. She wasn't going to let Langston Miles or anyone else keep her from clearing her name. They turned and began to move quickly down the alley, knowing that the fight was far from over. But for the first time in days, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. The cool, salty air of the harbor whipped across Elena's face as she and Noah approached the abandoned shipyard. The distant sound of waves crashing against the shore barely registered over the pounding of their hearts. Elena felt the weight of the folder in her hands, the key to everything, the evidence that could clear her name, but also the final piece of the puzzle that would expose Avery Langston and Derek Miles. They had managed to escape the building, but the danger, was far from over. Langston and Miles knew they were onto them now, and they would stop at nothing to ensure the truth never saw the light of day. As Noah and Elena made their way through the shadows of the crumbling warehouse, every creak of the metal walls seemed to echo with the heavy weight of the threat looming over them. The shipyard was a maze of rusted machinery, abandoned ships, and crumbling storage containers, the ideal place for a final confrontation. The ideal place for a man like Langston, someone who thrived in the shadows, who preferred to operate in the dead of night, far from the prying eyes of the public. This was where they would either make their stand or be silenced forever. "Do you think they're already here?" Elena asked, her voice low and tense as they crept through the yard. Noah didn't answer immediately. He was scanning the area, his eyes darting between the old warehouses and the rusted ships. He looked like a man who had seen too many ambushes to let his guard down. "I'm sure they are," he said finally. "Langston isn't the type to leave anything to chance. We need to be quick, but we also need to be careful. They'll be expecting us." Elena nodded, her pulse quickening. The plan was simple. They had the documents, the evidence, that could bring Langston and Miles to their knees. All they had to do was get it to the authorities before Langston could stop them. But getting out of here alive was another matter entirely. The wind picked up, sending a chill through her bones. She felt the weight of the folder in her hands again, a constant reminder of what was at stake. She wasn't just fighting for her freedom anymore. She was fighting for a justice, for the truth that had been buried by people willing to do anything to protect their secrets. They reached the edge of the shipyard, a high metal fence separating them from the far side of the property. Elena's mind raced with possible escape routes, but she knew there was no turning back now. Langston and Miles were closing in, and they had to finish this. Stay close, Noah muttered, his voice barely audible as he moved toward the back of the largest warehouse. Elena followed, her footsteps quick but silent. They needed to find a way to turn the tables, to catch Langston off guard, but she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that they were walking right into a trap. They reached the door to the warehouse and stopped. Noah peered inside, then turned back to Elena, his expression grim. "They're inside," he whispered, "but there's no sign of Langston. Miles is probably waiting for us." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Miles? "Yeah," Noah said. "He's the muscle behind this operation. If anyone's going to pull the trigger, it's him." Without another word, they slipped inside, the door creaking behind them. The warehouse was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of street lamps outside. The air smelled of oil and rust, thick with the scent of abandoned ships and forgotten machinery. As they crept deeper into the shadows, Elena's senses heightened. She could hear the faint sounds of movement ahead, footsteps, the soft shuffle of boots on concrete. Her hand instinctively moved to the small gun tucked in her waistband, but Noah stopped her with a quick shake of his head. "Not yet," he whispered. "We don't want to tip them off. We need to find Langston first." Elena felt her breath catch in her throat. Langston, the man behind the entire conspiracy, the one who had orchestrated the frame job, the one who had used high-tech biotech to erase her identity. He was the mastermind, and he wasn't about to let his empire fall apart without a fight. They moved further into the warehouse, the sounds of voices growing louder. Elena's heart raced as she saw a figure moving in the distance. Miles, standing near a stack of crates, a handgun in his hand. He was scanning the area, clearly waiting for them to make their move. "Stay down," Noah murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He gestured for Elena to follow him as they crouched behind a large shipping container. Miles was close, as too close for comfort. Elena could see the cold determination in his eyes as he scanned the shadows, his muscles tense, ready for action. Noah slowly edged around the corner of the container, his eyes locked on Miles. Elena's pulse quickened. If they made a sound, if they moved too quickly, Miles would spot them. And that would be the end of it. They waited, their breaths shallow, their muscles coiled like springs, ready to act at a moment's notice. Time seemed to stretch, each second feeling like an eternity. Then, as if on cue, a voice broke the silence. "You've been busy, Elena." Langston's voice echoed through the warehouse, smooth and cold like the edge of a knife. "But it's over now." Elena's heart skipped. Langston? He had found them. She and Noah sprang into action at once, moving swiftly and silently through the Rukatix, then worse the shadows. But it was too late. The door to the warehouse slammed open and Langston's men poured in, their guns drawn. "Miles!" Langston shouted, his voice dripping with authority. "Stop them!" It was chaos. The sound of gunfire rang out, and Elena dove for cover, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear Noah's voice, sharp and commanding as he returned fire, the sharp crack of the gunshots reverberating through the warehouse. Elena's eyes darted around, looking for Langston. She had to end this. She had to stop him. Through the smoke and debris, she spotted Langston standing near the back of the warehouse, his face twisted in a sneer. He was heading toward a door that led out to the docks. "Noah," It's him! It's Langston! Elena shouted, her voice urgent. Without thinking, she surged forward, her legs carrying her faster than she'd ever moved. She had one chance to catch him, one chance to make him pay for everything he had done. She rounded the corner just as Langston reached the door. He turned to face her, his cold eyes narrowing as he raised his gun. "You should have stayed out of it." "Nah," Langston spat, his finger tightening on the trigger. But before he could fire, a figure leaped from the shadows. Rex. With a savage growl, Rex lunged at Langston, knocking the gun from his hand and sending him crashing to the ground. Elena stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding with disbelief and gratitude. Rex, her loyal protector, had saved her once again. Langston struggled to his feet, but Noah was there in an instant, his gun trained on the man. "It's over, Langston," Noah said, his voice cold. "You're done." As the sound of sirens echoed in the distance, the warehouse filled with the rush of sirens and the distant, steady march of law enforcement. Langston and Miles had lost. It was over. The aftermath of the confrontation at the shipyard felt surreal. The chaos, the gunfire, the adrenaline, all of it was fading now, replaced by the sharp reality of what had just transpired. Elena stood at the edge of the dock, her hand gripping the folder of evidence tightly. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of the ocean, but it was the sound of Rex's heavy breathing beside her that brought her back to the present. Rex had been the unsung hero in this story, his loyalty and sharp instincts having saved them both more times than she could count. The dog stood at her side, his eyes calm, alert, his body still tense from the earlier fight, but there was a sense of peace in his posture now. He had been through everything with her, every high and low, and had never once left her side. Elena placed a hand on his head, running her fingers through his thick fur. "You did it again, didn't you, boy?" she murmured, her voice full of gratitude. Rex looked up at her, his eyes soft and knowing. They didn't need words. He understood. Noah had already placed Langston and Miles under arrest. The authorities were arriving in force now, securing the site and sweeping for any remaining threats. Langston's empire had crumbled in a matter of hours, and it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. Elena had the documents, the evidence that would expose the entire conspiracy, and now, with Langston and Miles in custody, there was no way for them to escape the consequences of their actions. Elena turned to Noah, her heart still racing. "It's really over, isn't it?" Noah's eyes softened as he watched her, his expression filled with a mixture of relief and respect. "Yeah, it's over. We got them." For a moment, Elena simply stood there, letting the weight of everything wash over her. The fear, the confusion, the uncertainty, everything that had clouded her mind for so long was finally lifting. She had been accused of a crime she didn't commit, framed by a powerful organization that would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. But now, with the truth in her hands, she could finally clear her name. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, Elena turned toward the direction of the approaching law enforcement officers. It was time to make her statement to the authorities, to ensure that Langston and Miles would face the full extent of the law. But even as she prepared for that final step, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Noah, sensing the weight of her thoughts, spoke again. "You did good, Elena. You fought for this. You fought for the truth, for your freedom. And now, you've got it." Elena looked up at him, her gaze steady. "I couldn't have done it without you. You didn't give up on me, even when everyone else did." Noah gave her a small smile, a look of understanding in his eyes. "Sometimes that's all it takes, not giving up." The officers arrived and quickly took Langston and Miles into custody. Their men were being rounded up as well, and the whole operation was beginning to unravel. The FBI had been alerted to the full extent of the biotech conspiracy, and the investigation was already spreading beyond the shipyard. Elena felt a sense of relief. Justice was finally within reach. The pieces were all falling into place, and it was happening faster than she had imagined. As the officers worked, Elena stepped back, still holding the folder tightly in her hands. Rex stood beside her, his head held high, his body calm but alert, as though he could sense that the danger had passed, at least for now. In the distance, a car pulled up, and Elena recognized the familiar face of Detective Ryan Holt. He stepped out of the vehicle, his expression serious but relieved when he saw her standing there. "Elena," Holt said, walking toward her. "I wasn't sure what to expect when I got the call, but I see you've already taken care of business." Elena nodded, her voice steady. "It's over, Holt. Langston and Miles are in custody. They're not going anywhere." Holt looked over at Rex, who had already shifted his gaze toward him, his eyes sharp but not unfriendly. "I see you've got some backup," Holt said, his smile widening. "I'm glad to see you two made it through in one piece." Elena smiled slightly, glancing down at Rex. "I couldn't have done it without him. Or Noah, for that matter," Holt added, glancing at the detective who had been with her throughout the ordeal. "You've got a good team behind you." Elena nodded again, feeling a sense of gratitude that was hard to put into words. She had been alone for so long, but in these last few days, she had found allies, people who believed in her when everything seemed stacked against her. And that made all the difference. "I'm just glad it's over," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. "I thought it would never end." Holt gave her a knowing look. "Sometimes that's how it feels. But you got through it. You stayed strong. And now you got a chance to start over." Elena stood for a moment, taking in the scene before her. The sun was beginning to set over the harbor, casting a golden light across the water. It felt like a new beginning, a fresh start after everything she had endured. For the first time in a long time, Elena could breathe. She could think clearly again. Noah walked over to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You did it, Elena. You got the truth out there." Elena looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "We did it. Together." As the officers secured the area and prepared to transport Langston and Miles, Elena felt a sense of peace settle over her. The fight had been long and hard, but the truth had finally won out. And in the end, that was all that mattered. No matter how deep the lies, the truth always finds a way, especially when led by those who never stop believing, Elena said softly, the words feeling more real now than they ever had before. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. As she turned toward the approaching officers, Rex by her side, Elena felt a sense of closure, knowing that justice had finally been served. It was time to rebuild her life, to find her way forward. And she knew that, no matter what the future held, she would never be alone again. "Take care of each other," Noah said, his voice filled with quiet sincerity. "And don't let the world drag you down." Elena gave him a final, thankful look. "I won't, I promise." With Rex at her side and the truth in her hands, Elena stepped forward, ready for whatever came next.